She woke up the next morning covered in blood. And the first thing she did wasn't scream, wasn't call for help. She just stared at the ceiling and whispered to herself, "I'm still alive." What happened the night before would take investigators years to fully understand, and what they eventually uncovered shocked an entire city. Los Angeles, a city of 10 million people, 10 million strangers, 10 million stories happening simultaneously on the same streets under the same sky. Most of those stories are ordinary: a late shift ending, a dinner with friends, a drive home. But some nights in LA, ordinary ends, and something else begins. That's what happened to Yadira Reyes. She wasn't looking for trouble. She wasn't in the wrong part of town. She wasn't doing anything different from what millions of people do every single night in every city in the world. She simply encountered the wrong person. And the terrifying truth about that? It could have been anyone. It could have been you. The evening started normally. No red flags, no gut feeling screaming at her to turn back. Nothing. And that's exactly what makes this story so disturbing. Because we've all been told to trust our instincts, watch for warning signs, stay aware. But what happens when the predator gives you no warning signs? What happens when the danger looks completely ordinary? He wasn't pacing nervously. He wasn't staring too long. He wasn't dressed strangely. He was just a man. Another face. Another stranger in a city full of strangers. Think about how many people you passed today. At the gas station, in the elevator, in the parking lot. You probably remember none of their faces. Yadira didn't remember his either. Not at first. But he had already noticed her. What happened next unfolded quickly. Attacks almost always do. The human brain hasn't evolved to process sudden violence. It freezes. It bargains. It searches desperately for an exit that may not exist. Time slows down. Details become hyper-vivid. The smell of the air, the texture of the ground, the sound of your own breathing getting faster. Yadira fought against someone far more prepared for this moment than she was, against someone who had almost certainly done this before. Pause for a second. I want you to actually think about this. If you were in her position that night, what is the one thing you would do to survive? Drop your answer in the comments right now. No wrong answers. The wildest theory wins. Because what Yadira actually did, nobody predicted. She survived. Against overwhelming odds, she survived. But surviving violence isn't the end of the story. It's almost never the end. Because once the physical danger is over, something else takes over. The mind replays it over and over and over. Every sound that resembles that night, every stranger who gets too close, every moment of being alone in the dark. Survivors carry the night with them, everywhere they go, for the rest of their lives. But Yadira did something extraordinary, something that many survivors understandably cannot bring themselves to do. She talked. She sat across from investigators and she described everything she could remember. Every detail, every sensation, every fragment her traumatized memory could recover. At the time, detectives listened carefully, took notes, filed reports, but they didn't yet understand just how important her words would eventually become. Here's where the story gets darker. Because Yadira's attack was not an isolated incident. Investigators across Los Angeles were quietly working separate cases, separate victims, separate files, separate tragedies. Each one seemingly unconnected, each one sitting in a different detective's drawer. But patterns are patient. They wait to be found. Slowly, investigators started noticing similarities. The method of attack, the type of location, the timeline between incidents. And then came the question that changed everything. What if this isn't multiple offenders? What if it's one person? The moment that possibility entered the room, every old file got pulled back out. Every cold lead got new attention. Every survivor's testimony was reread, including Yadira's.
Okay, this is the part where I want your take. Investigators had multiple crimes, multiple victims, spread across years. Do you think the gaps between attacks were random or calculated? Was this person controlling their impulses? Or were there victims we simply never found? Comment your theory. Seriously, the true crime community on this channel figures things out. Then came the breakthrough: DNA. If you've watched enough true crime content, you know what DNA evidence means. It doesn't forget. It doesn't get confused. It doesn't change its story after 20 years. Evidence that had been sitting in storage was re-examined with updated technology, and this time it pointed somewhere. Toward a man who had for years moved through ordinary life without suspicion. A neighbor, a co-worker, someone people walked past on the street without a second glance. That's the detail that keeps investigators up at night. Not the crimes themselves, but the years in between. The grocery runs, the conversations, the absolute normalcy of a person carrying something like this. When authorities finally made their move, the scope of what they uncovered was far larger than anyone had publicly anticipated. Victims who had never met each other, crimes separated by geography, investigations that had never been formally connected, all linked. Here's what true crime coverage often gets wrong. We spend enormous amounts of time focused on the criminal, the psychology, the investigation, the arrest, and almost no time on what it actually means to be the person who lived. Yadira didn't survive that night and immediately become a hero. She survived that night and had to figure out how to go to the grocery store again, how to walk to her car after dark again, how to exist in a world where she now knew exactly what it was capable of. Years passed before she understood the full significance of what she had endured. Years before she knew there were other victims. Years before she knew her testimony had helped build a case. But here's the thing about survival. It doesn't ask your permission before it becomes important. That one night, that one testimony, that one woman who refused to disappear quietly helped expose a predator who may have otherwise continued for years more. I genuinely want to know. Does knowing that one survivor's testimony helped crack a case like this change how you think about coming forward after trauma? Drop your honest thoughts below. This community actually has real conversations. One survivor. One investigation that refused to stop. One predator who believed he had escaped forever. He hadn't. The most chilling criminals in history weren't caught because they made dramatic mistakes. They were caught because somewhere along the way,
Someone survived long enough to remember their face. Yadira remembered. But our next case involves a different kind of evidence entirely. Not a witness, not DNA. Photographs. Hundreds of them. Images of ordinary people going about ordinary lives. Until investigators looked closer and realized something no one had anticipated. Some of the people in those photographs were never identified, and some of them may never be found. The disturbing mystery of the killer's photo collection is next.
And before we get there, I want to take just a second to say something to everyone still here. If this story kept you watching, if it made you think, if it gave you that unsettling feeling that true crime does when it hits differently, then you already know what this channel is about. We don't do clickbait here. We don't rush the story. We let it breathe. Because these are real people and real events, and they deserve more than a 2-minute recap. If that's the kind of content you want more of, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button. It takes 1 second, and it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who are looking for exactly this. And if you haven't subscribed to True Horror Narrations yet, this is your sign. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new cases regularly, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. Every like, every subscribe, every comment you leave telling me your theories and your reactions, it all keeps this channel alive, and it keeps these stories being told. So thank you, genuinely, for watching, for staying, for being part of True Horror Narrations. Now, are you ready for the photographs? Stay with me.